Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Door to Door. It's the library marketing team coming to you from HarperCollins Publishers, but our various ports in the storm. I think we should tell everybody where we're from. I'm in Astoria, Queens. Chris, where are you?
Believe it or not, I'm in Indiana, Fort Wayne, Indiana. This is what it looks like. Come visit.
In your
You won't be
mind.
disappointed. In my mind, yes.
Lainey, what's happening?
Mississippi. Yes, as I say, obviously.
Makes me laugh. Anyway, we are so thrilled to be together and to have two very, very special authors with us today on this episode. We have Juliet Grames, the author of 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna, and Laura Zigman, the author of Separation Anxiety. These are two books that are near and dear to our hearts. Hello, Juliet. Hello, Laura.
Hey. Hi, everybody.
We're happy you're here.
We're so excited to be here, Virginia.
So excited. We had so much fun yesterday in the rehearsal that this can only be even better.
It's true, but we're not supposed to tell our secrets till the end.
No, we're going to have secrets at the end because in addition to both of these authors writing these incredible books, which are so chewy and so delicious and such great book club fodder, they're both publishing insiders. And so what we're going to do is speak with Juliet first, and we'll put Laura in the green room, which means she's going to sit right where she is and just pretend to be green. And then we'll switch and we'll talk to Laura. Each author is going to read from their book a little bit and answer our questions. And then we're going to bring both of them on at the end so that we can talk about this sort of really cool thing about authors who come from both sides of the publishing desk. You know, we've had, it's a really interesting, it's a unique perspective, I think, to have authors who are in the publishing world and also writing. We had lots of cool conversations yesterday, which I always say we should record because they are very fun. We're all just chatting about, you know, book jackets and publicity and I don't know, just lots of fun things. So we're going to talk about each book with each author, and then we're going to have them both back to talk about inside baseball, inside publishing. So you can certainly write in your questions now for either author, and we'll do them as they come, but be sure to save some questions for both of them at the end. So Laura, do you want to say anything before we put you into a green room?
I just want to thank the three of you, Chris and Lainey and Virginia, for all your support all these months and for this event and for HarperCollins. And I'm thrilled to be here with librarians. And, you know, obviously most writers started reading at a young age and love libraries. And so I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so cool to meet you. When we met yesterday, it was like, I feel like I know you. But I only met you yesterday virtually, and it was just so neat because I just absolutely adore your book. So we can't wait to talk to you. And Juliet, it was so great to see you. And we've been together since day one and prior to.
It's true. I mean, librarians have been Stella's first and best fans. I'm so glad to talk to them again. And I'm really, really excited to be here with Laura because Separation Anxiety is exactly the kind of funny, real world story that is just perfect for, I think, everyone's pandemic mood reading. And it's just exciting to be paired with her today.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so great. So love these books. Okay. All right. So Laura, will come back to you in a bit. Juliet, we're going to start with you and we're going to start talking a little bit about your book. So Laura, sit tight and we'll be back in a little bit. All right. I don't know where she went. She's gone. Chris, we can't hear you.
She's in the green room.
She's still sitting in that chair.
She could be in Mississippi for all we know.
This is definitely the swankiest Zoom experience I've had of many because never before have I had a Zoom green room. This is, you know, I just feel very special and I look forward to going to the green room myself in a little while.
We hope you like the grapes,
drinks,
the fruit
and M&Ms and anything you would like.
Tiny little bottles of water, those cute little bottles of water. I love them.
Anything you can find in your kitchen, we put it there.
That's very funny. Oh man, we're losing our minds. Just like we lost our minds, how's that for a segue? When we read The 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna, now out in paperback, and so happy for you. This book took our breath away. I mean, Lainey, do you remember when we came in, you and I were just blah, blah, blah about it? It was, it's an absolutely beautiful book. And as I say, and so many reviews, so many great reviews, made the library reads list in May of 2019 when it came out. So many reviews, but the New York Times, I think, sums it up. A meaty family saga set in Calabria and Connecticut, crossing 2 centuries and 5 generations. In conjuring this absorbing life, Grames has created a satisfying doorstop of a book, rich in detail, tightly written, and delightfully easy to get lost in. So true. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Virginia. This is the book, the paperback. Isn't it pretty? I love the paperback cover. Thank you, Echo and HarperCollins, for all your work on this. And thank you all librarians for being here today on this Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. It's a delight to talk to you. Virginia told me that she wanted us to read, and I don't normally read from the book. I usually just talk about it. So I'm actually going to go ahead and open up with just 90 seconds right off the first page to get you in the mood, and then tell you a little bit about my why I wrote the book and how I came to this story. This is the story of Maria Stella Fortuna II, called Stella, formerly of Jevoli, a mountain village in Calabria, Italy, and lately of Connecticut in the United States of America. Her life stretched over more than a century, and during that life, she endured much bad luck and hardship. This is the story of how she never died. Over the course of her 100 years, the second Stella Fortuna, I will tell you about the first in a little bit, would survive 8 near-death experiences, or 7, depending on how you count them. She would be bludgeoned and concussed, she would asphyxiate, she would hemorrhage, and she would be lobotomized. She would be partially submerged in boiling oil, be split from belly to bowel on 2 unrelated occasions, and on a different day have her life saved only by a typo. Once, she would almost accidentally commit suicide. Was it fantastically bad luck that the second Stella encountered such danger, or fantastically good luck that she survived it? I can't decide. In either case, it is rather a lot of adventure to pack into a single life story. But the Calabres are a tough people. It is what we are known for, being stubborn beyond any reason and without any care for self or well-being. For so many centuries of our history, we had so little we were able to fight for that this instinct is irrepressible. When we have set our mind on something, the force of our will is greater than the threat of disorder, disgrace, or death. What Stella Fortuna fought for so stubbornly was her life, 7 or 8 different times. I wish I could say no one ever faulted her for that. So that's the beginning of the 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna, which is a family saga that, as Virginia said, spans about 100 years, 5 generations of a Southern Italian family. And it focuses on 2 sisters who are best friends throughout their lives. They're like this until in the present day, when we meet them, we learn that they have been locked in a blood feud for 30 years and no one can quite figure out what went wrong between them. So the book goes back to the day, like the era of World War I, to pick apart their long relationship, the trials and tribulations of their mother, who was living alone in this tiny village in Calabria in the mountains, while her husband had emigrated to the United States to try to get money for the family, and was raising all her children alone. And it follows through the difficulties of between the war years, emigration to the United States, courtship and reconciling an immigrant identity with what it means to be American, which is, these are all themes that were incredibly important to me because I am, in fact, Italian. My mother was born in Hartford, Connecticut, into a very tight-knit Italian family, and they were just a huge part of my life growing up. They still are. There's many of them, and they're everywhere. They're probably on this event right now because they come to all my events, so thank you guys if you're there. But it's a true story. But the inspiration for this book specifically was my grandmother and her sister. Lainey, if you want to go ahead and show them that photo of these lovely ladies, very important women in my life. You're going to see a photo of, yeah, there we go. So on the left, we have my grandmother, Antoinette, and on the right is her sister, Connie. And they were a year apart in age. And when I was growing up, I was the oldest grandchild, and they actually took care of me while my parents were working. So I was with them all the time. They're the reason that I grew up hearing and speaking Italian, well, their dialect, their Calabrese dialect. And the reason I'm so proud to be an Italian American, and I just feel so culturally imbued with Italianness, you know, their folk songs, their proverbs, their recipes, it was all just, it's in my blood because of them. But I was 5 years old, so I was old enough to remember when we had a very traumatic experience in my family, and my grandmother sustained a cerebral trauma. After which the doctor said she was certainly going to die, and they offered us an experimental procedure, a lobotomy, to try to save her life. And we went ahead with this procedure, even though all odds were she wouldn't survive, but she had survived many things before. You would say 7 or 8 other near-death experiences. And she did survive the lobotomy and went on to live another 30 years after that. And that was great. You know, we got to enjoy her company for another 30 years. She was the matriarch of a huge family. But all was not well when she woke up. She had, in fact, been lobotomized, and her personality had been drastically changed. And among many things that happened, changes that occurred in her, some of which were humorous and some of which were not, she would never speak to her sister again. So this was a real cleaving moment in my family, because my grandmother had had many, many children. She had had too many children in her own estimation, as well as in others. And my aunt had been unlucky in fertility and had not been able to have any children herself. So this was really lucky for my grandmother, because they bought houses next to each other. They raised all the kids together in one shared backyard. And now that they couldn't be in the same room anymore, it meant that my aunt sort of lost access to her surrogate children and these grandchildren who were not hers biologically. And it's, you know, I mean, we all continued to honor her and spend time with her, of course, but it's hard, you know, when you have to choose between your sick mother and your aunt to visit on Mother's Day, your sick mother is going to win. And so I was 5 when this happened. And even then I understood on some level how unfair it was to my great aunt. And I decided somewhere in my dumb little brain that I was going to try to be a replacement granddaughter for her and just spend as much time with her as possible and try to collect her life story and be there for her. And she was a character. Lainey, here's a good time to show a picture of my aunt. This woman told me so many stories. She actually passed away. Yeah, that's her. That's my Aunt Con. And I know that you're asking yourself, what are those things? Those are zucchini. Everything she did was bigger and more than everything everyone else did. She was amazing. And she one of the things she did bigger and more than everyone else was collect family stories. And she, you know, told me all about them. She helped me reconstruct her life, her childhood, their story of their emigration and the hardship their mother went through. And, you know, when she saw I was really becoming fascinated by this oral history, and I had this strong desire to write about her and my grandmother, she introduced me to a bunch of her friends in the Italian American community in and around Hartford, Connecticut. And then eventually I went and I lived in the village they were born in Jevoli. And she, although she left in 1939, was able to give me a list of names of people to connect with there. And so she, you know, basically this became the obsession of my life. And I started, you know, the seeds of this book were germinating already when I was 5 years old after that accident. But, you know, 30 years later, it's finally come to fruition in the form of a novel that has really become bigger than my story of my grandmother and my aunt, because I've met so many fascinating immigrant and Italian women along the way, and men too. So it's become more of an homage to their generation, what they went through, both the Italians who came here, all the immigrants who came here and had to deal with that you know, the butting heads of two cultures and immigrant identity and the, you know, menial work that they had to do to get by and keep their families together and the incredible hardships that they suffered, but also to the place they came from, this very beautiful place with, you know, a really hard history, but a fantastic sense of humor and culture. And I wanted to write about Calabria. I wanted to write about the lost stories of this generation of immigrant women. And I wanted to lead this publication for them so that they have someone telling their story, because there's not a ton written about this part of the world, about Southern Italy. So I'm going to close out my little presentation with another very short reading. But before I do, I will say, again, thank you for attending today. I love doing book clubs. So if this is a book that you're reading with your library and you want me to zoom in, I would be more than happy to. And also, I've given my HarperCollins library marketing friends a link to this digital. They actually put this booklet together for me for ALA last year, but we have it digitally. It's a recipe guide that also includes discussion questions, behind the book essay, stuff like that. And thanks, yes. Perfect. It's all on my website, but we can send you a PDF too. So if you're looking for materials to talk to a book group about, there's some stuff there. I'm actually doing one tomorrow where they're physically making a luncheon, which is really exciting. And people are coming by for pickup. So there's lots of, we've done a lot of fun stuff along the way. But again, thank you guys for listening today. Let me conclude with a very, very short reading, sending this out to all the other children of immigrants who are watching right now. When Antonio Fortuna came home after 4 years in the army, Jevuli was too small for him. He sailed to the United States for the first time in February 1920, following in the footsteps of 4 million other Italian immigrants. Most of them came from the South, Sicily, Campania, Puglia, and Basilicata, as well as Calabria, where Italian unification had hurt the most, where war and taxes had squeezed the already impoverished contadini dry. The South was emptied of adult men. In Calabria, 30% of households had no capo, no male head. Italian men emigrated because they wanted to work, to make better lives for themselves than the poverty and exploitation they had left, although there was plenty of poverty and exploitation in America too. Italian laborers, almost always men, often illiterate and with no recourse to aid or service or advice, crossed the ocean in steerage to be herded onto trains bound for coal mines in West Virginia or for jobs laying railroad track in the forests of Pennsylvania. They left unpaved, unplumbed, deforested, and malarial villages. They left starvation, cholera, entrenched feudalism, an inescapable class system. They left their families in hopes of reuniting with them under better auspices. They brought their love of food and orderly gardens, their languages and their prejudices, their mysterious triple God and their myriad saints, their rites and their songs and their pageants. They brought their worship of their mothers. They brought their mothers. In many cases, they intended to go back, which made our Italian ancestors unusual among would-be American immigrants. But in many cases, they never did go back, which made us just the same as everyone else. Thank you all.
Wow. You make me want to read the book all over again. It's amazing. Really, it's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that, reading both of those sections. Getting back to the that book club guide with the recipes, I have to say, check it out. We just made the link available and you can get it on Juliet's website. But there are some really yummy recipes in there, in addition to the questions and the behind the book piece. But on one Facebook Live, Chris Laney and I each made something from that booklet.
You did? You didn't tell me.
Yeah.
Amazing. How did it go? I hope no one made the chicken.
No. No.
Spaghetti,
I made the sauce, the gravy.
eggplant.
Oh,
I
that
made
was
the
so
eggplant.
good. Chris made
Mm.
the eggplant. Yeah. Yeah, we
Caramel.
we made the meals in our kitchens at our respective apartments and then brought them in.
It's amazing. I wish I had been there to eat them.
Yeah, we'll have to send you the link. But it was delicious. So, Lainey, did you make the cookies?
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they're probably not anywhere near what they're supposed to taste like, but they were very good.
Yeah, and the eggplant was clutch. And the sauce, yeah, it was super fun to do, and it was a great. I don't know, that book is just, as I said, it's delicious, and there's so much to talk about in that book. It's really something else. It's epic. I mean, all those words, epic and sweeping, yeah. But it's these characters, it's this like spanning all these years, and they're beautiful, their beginnings. And Chris, can you show the cover again?
Sure.
I just love it.
Sorry, bear with me. There we go.
It's these two sisters in that time, those the olives. It's just, you can feel it. It's really something. It's quite beautiful. The cover's beautiful. The book is really beautiful. It's a journey. You go on a journey with them, and you don't forget about them. So thank you for bringing them to us. So I took a peek at the questions. There's really just love. So many, because the book came out a year ago. So there's just so much love. Sonia says the tomato sauce is amazing. Yeah, everybody is just saying the book is delicious. Yes, there's just so much love here. You'll see the quotes, the captions later on. Can't wait to try the recipes. Now, to be clear, the recipes aren't in the book, but they are inspired by the characters who in the book. So, but it's terrific. So, Lainey, Chris, do you have anything to add before we put Juliet in the green room and then come back and talk about all the insider stuff and publishing? I don't even know what I'm talking about.
No, just again, appreciation for coming on. Again, like Virginia said, this book is one that just sticks. It really does. Again, it doesn't feel that long ago that we were doing these recipes and talking about the upcoming publication of the hardcover. And it's really exciting to see. Again, this is such a book club book, and it is featured on our book club website. So for anyone looking for details on that, you can email us. And like Juliet said, she's there for you to do Zoom calls. But perfect book club book. Can't stress that enough.
I remember like the whole department, academic and library, we sat around a table and we're just like, we want to talk about it. It's perfect for book club.
Yeah. And Juliet, for you personally, what's the best way for people who want to have you virtually visit their library? Do you want them to go through you? They can come through us?
Either is totally fine.
Okay.
If they know you, they can go through you. If anything is fine with me.
Okay. So you heard it there. Juliet, she came to, we had a presentation with librarians, and you came and gave this wonderful presentation. That feels so long ago. You were pregnant at the time.
I was so pregnant, and there's a video online if you want to see what I looked like 9 months pregnant. Thank you, Library Love Fest, for that special memory. But no, I honestly, this book, I've been so fortunate with how it was received. This month, it's actually the pennies pick at Costco. So I'm getting a lot of feedback from that, which is really wonderful. But I honestly ascribe its success to the library marketing team specifically, and to the librarians who were its early champions, because you guys really, you took it and ran with it before anyone else, and everyone listens to you. So as they should.
Well, that's very nice of you. Okay, so we have so many librarians who are saying that they want this for their book clubs, and they're recommending like crazy. So yay, long shelf life for this one. Okay, Juliet, we are going to have you back after we speak with Laura about her books, so then you can all talk together.
I have a lot of green M&Ms to eat, so Chris, if you could just pop me off to the.
My pleasure. Here we go. Enjoy the M&Ms. Okay. Time for Laura?
Time for Laura.
All right, let's bring her on.
Bring her on. This is fun. It's fun. It's fun. Love the book.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you? What did you do while we were away?
I was reading, which I love.
Oh,
And I was going to sneak in the kitchen and work on dinner, but I was like, you know what? Too risky. So I
Yeah.
sat here.
You could, you could bring your laptop into the kitchen and we could watch whatever you're making.
I'm not that good of a cook. I don't want to scare anyone.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't believe you. I think anything you touch turns to gold, like this book, Separation Anxiety, which
Oh,
we love.
thank you.
And we're not alone. So many fans of this book because it's it has touched so many hearts with its, I think, with its true voice. I mean, this is I found these characters to be so real because they're not perfect. And I think that's once you go there and you can show these people, I love this character so much because she is a woman who admits to her failings. You know what I mean? And I think that there's something very winning about that she is that way with herself.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna step back. Well, there are so many things I would love to say. I haven't read this quote yet. I'm gonna read this quote and then I'm gonna have you talk about your book. Okay, so Separation Anxiety, which went on sale March 3rd. So not that long ago, crazy time.
Yeah.
This is a quote, so many quotes, Claire Massoud, but Alice Hoffman's quote I love. Separation Anxiety is a hilarious, heartbreaking, and thought-provoking portrait of a difficult marriage, as fierce as it is funny. Zigman's sharp eye for contemporary life is a revelation, a wise and wonderful novel. I love that because while this is a funny book, there are moments in this book that aren't funny, that are just hard. And that's, I think, why this book has resonated with so many people, because it sort of runs the range, which makes it very, very real to the nerve. So Laura, I'll stop taking up the airspace and have you talk a little bit about the book, okay?
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's really encouraging to hear, when you want to write something like this, it's nerve-wracking because you want it to be entertaining, but I was very committed to having it start in a very real place. And the very real place for Judy was this, I call it a still point, but it feels like it's when everything just goes dark, like when you reset your computer and that screen goes dark and you're just waiting for the light to come back on. And there's a part of you that thinks it's never going to come back on. Like when you do your computer, you think everything is lost. And for me, autobiographically, since I write from a place, it always starts in something that's happened to me or something I'm going through, and then I fictionalize from there. But I had that still point. I had lost both my parents, a couple friends. I'd really lost my writing career, my fiction writing career. My son was growing up, and everyone goes through a rough spot in their marriage. So we went through a rough spot in ours, and there just seemed to be all these pieces that made life very difficult. And I wanted to be true to that. I didn't want to sugarcoat that. And I remember when I sent the first 100 pages to an old friend of mine who's an agent, and he was like, he's very funny, and he read it and he goes, "Does it get funny?" And I said, well, yeah, it does get funny. But I wanted it to start in that place, and I didn't want it to be false in that way, because I feel like so many of us go through these periods, whether it's in our 50s, my 40s and 50s were the hardest, although my teens were not that easy either, but anyway. But we all have periods of time, whether it's middle age or before that are really, really rough. And I think our culture really doesn't allow for the sharing of it. I mean, when people ask you how you are, we all say, hey, great, because no one wants to be the Debbie Downer that's always like, well, actually, since you asked. So we keep a lot in, and I wanted this to be, to really show what it feels like to go through that dark time.
Yeah, that's, but I think that's, actually, I remember reading page 1 and not wanting to put it down.
Oh, that's.
Because I just thought this is somebody I want to know. I neglected to go back and talk about some of your previous publications, Animal Husbandry being among them, Dating Big Bird. But so how, there's a wonderful piece for those who have access to Edelweiss. There's a wonderful piece written by Laura on the catalog page, sort of a behind the book piece, which is very reflective of very much what you just said right now. Why did you write this? Where did this come from? And where were you in between animal husbandry and this?
Yeah, that's
so-
a good question because, most people, myself included, you think, I had 4 novels published between animal husbandry in 2006. My 4th novel was published, piece of work. And the first book was made into a film. And people think, and we do too, like, oh, well, you've achieved a certain level of achievement and your success will just continue and your career will just continue. And most of us learn through these hard knocks that that's not true. Success is really fluid. Failure is very fluid. I say success and failure with quotation marks because it's how you define it. But, I thought I had achieved a certain level of security financially and all that. And it just goes out the window. Writing is a creative process. There's a great piece that I'm included in today in the Financial Times in the UK with Jenny Offal and several other writers and artists about what happens when your creativity dries up, when you hit that block. Like, how do you get past it? And for me, a lot happened after 2006. I got breast cancer. Both my parents got sick. A lot of stuff happened, and I completely dried up in terms of creativity. I could not write fiction. And yet I needed to earn a living. And so I turned to ghostwriting, which was a great pivot in terms of having a way to use my skills and get an income. But it was really counterproductive to what we do as novelists, which is to write in your own voice or find a voice of a character that comes from you. And when you ghostwrite, you're writing in someone else's voice and you're using all these skills, but it just further alienated me from my own self because I was just writing in other people's voices and telling their stories, which was a great relief because I could not tell my own or could not tell one that I would invent. But I really wanted to go back to fiction writing. And finally in 2015, after a lot of friends encouraged me and I finally found some source of strength within myself, I started and I wanted to tell that story, this story.
Yeah. It feels like, because you had said that most of your writings are somewhat autobiographical. So,
Right.
So now there you are, and you're not writing anything that remotely relates to you.
Right.
John, as you just say, on one hand is a relief. And then on the other hand, it almost feels like it happened when it was supposed to, right? Like when there was enough of a scab that you could go there. Is that it?
I think that's a great point. The only problem when you're waiting for the thing to happen the way it's supposed to happen is like money. That's the only problem. If there hadn't been any, like, if people didn't have to earn a living, you'd just be like, well, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait till everything. And that's not to say you don't try while you're waiting. I mean, you have to make things happen in order to get to a point where it happens. But it's hard to be Zen when you're trying to earn. That's always the conundrum with so many of us who are, most people have to earn. So, but I do believe that's true, that there's a certain incubation period or just a certain really organic process that happens, and you're ready when you're ready. I mean, people had been encouraging, friends had been encouraging me for years and years and years, and I was just like, yeah, not ready. And then somehow, somewhere, you begin to be ready, and then you're ready to tell your story or tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry for your loss, first of all. I think
Thank you.
should be acknowledged, and so sorry for as you say, everybody has something that stops them. You had a lot that stopped you. But boy, did you start with a bang when you were ready to. And I'm glad for you that you were ready. Do you want to talk a little bit about the book, and we can show some pictures when you get to that part, because it's pretty lovely.
Yeah, I sense some things. Yeah, so separation anxiety really is about a woman named Judy. Judy and her husband Gary are separated, but they can't afford to get divorced, so they're stuck living in their house. And they pretend to be still married, but they're basically living in separate parts of the house. They have a son who is now a teenager. And Judy is just at this point, as I said before, where she's just kind of bereft. There's so much loss. She's lost her parents. She was a very successful children's book writer. She had an animated PBS series made from her first book, which was like a weirdness manifesto called There's a Bird in Your Head. And her best friend is dying. Her marriage is on the rocks. And, you know, like I said, it does get funny, but those are the pieces that are at the beginning. And it's a very short time frame of the book. It's a 6-week time period where she has to figure out a way to make the tuition payment. Their son goes to a very annoying Montessori school. And so in order to make the payment, the tuition payment, they end up taking in these people puppets that are coming to the school to do a 2-week unit. And at the beginning of the book, Judy goes down to the basement to clean and declutter in the Marie Kondo method. And as she goes down and she opens one of the boxes of her son's old baby clothes, she finds a baby sling. And she's suddenly overcome with the sort of lost opportunity. She never even used the baby sling when he was a baby. She feels like, oh, now he's 12 or 13 and there's, you know, it's a lost opportunity for that. But she feels this instant urge to be connected to something, to feel the weight of something. She goes up the stairs and looks around the kitchen for something to put in the sling, and there's nothing really that good. And she looks down on the floor and there's the dog. And it happens by accident. She puts the dog in the sling, and there's something incredibly comforting the way it is when you have an animal, a dog or a cat, and it's like a therapy animal, whether it officially wears a vest or not. So Judy's dog goes in the sling and it never comes out. And she's at that point, she's in her 50s. And if you're in your 50s like I am, you get to a great point where you just don't care anymore. So Judy doesn't care. She wears the dog in secret, and then she's discovered to be wearing the dog by her husband. And she's kind of like, yep, I wear my dog. And then her son is embarrassed. She goes to the son's school to do a thing, and he's embarrassed. He's like, Mom, are you really going to wear the dog? And she's like, yep, wearing the dog. And there's a point where it's just so important for her to have this this connection to the dog, to something sort of feels like it's keeping her together.
Yeah, I remember the scene where she gets kind of bullied was it the park?
Yeah.
Right? And those
Yeah.
women are just so lousy.
Well,
Like-
it's funny. One of my first, they all accuse her of sort of imprisoning the dog and animal cruelty. And it was funny because my first, my Kirkus review came in, and it was kind of funny because most of the review was focused on the fact that the reviewer felt very uncomfortable that the dog was in the sling. And it just, it didn't occur to me that, it occurred to me in a fictional sense. Obviously, I wrote the scene because I live in Cambridge, and everything that you do is completely up for, I'm sure anywhere you live is sort of up for judgment. But I'm sure if I wore my dog to the reservoir, I would get stopped. I'm sure that's not even a fictional scene or what would happen, but it didn't occur to me that it would be a real thing. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting that the experiences between the son, who there's the reactions are pretty overall, they're kind of the same, and I kind of love that she doesn't care. This is something that's filling a void, but it also seems to be some sort of a healer. It's got a healing element to it. Certainly for her emotionally, it does.
Yeah.
It's sort of,
yeah. I've been asked, did you wear your dog? And I did not wear my dog. I had not grown up with a dog. We got a dog when my son was 8 or 9, and I didn't grow up with animals. My family was allergic to them. So I had a lot of friends all my life who had dogs and cats, and they, I just never understood. And then we got our Sheltie, and I immediately understood. And then about a year after we got the dog, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And that was in 2010. And the dog was still almost a puppy, so I took her everywhere. I took her with me to her chemo treatments, left her in the car. I took her all over the place. And at the end of these very tough days, for that short amount of time that my mother was sick before she died, I had the dog with me all the time. So I didn't actually wear her, but I felt like I had the benefit of that incredible comfort that you just can't really get from people sometimes. It's like you just pick up the dog and they just absorb all of the sadness and all the stress. And so that's, I think, where that device came from.
Yeah.
It's the magic of fiction, I guess.
Right. But drawn from something.
Yes. Yeah.
And Chris and Lainey are both nodding. They're both home with their dogs. Right, guys?
I was just petting
Yeah.
mine before I got
Oh,
there. Yeah, I mean, I get it. There's a comfort there, and it's nice to have them. I also love that Judy like writes the articles for like a self-help website when it's like I don't feel like I can help myself, much less.
right. Right. Yeah. I was working for a happiness app for a while, and we kept changing our direction as you do in those kinds of companies. You start out as one thing, and then you as they say, and I use the word again, pivot. And we kept pivoting to different things. And so we ended up doing content for a while, and I was writing those very short pieces with neuroscience to back everything. And they were really fun to write, but in the book, it is ironic that she's writing these pieces and she's just a mess. Yeah.
And also, I think you said that, or maybe I'm confusing this with what in real life, that you were next, they were like half your age or something, and they were all these young kids.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
I was 50 at the time, which seems so young now, but I was 50 at the time, and everyone was really in their early 20s, except the company founder. She was in her mid 30s, but I mean, it was ridiculous. I kept asking where the paper was and where the supply closet was, and they were like, "There's no paper. This is an app. Like, we don't have." They had snacks, but they had so many snacks, but they did not have any. No pencils, nothing. I brought my own. You know.
Oh my God, I love that so much. Laura, do you want to read a piece from Separation Anxiety?
Sure. I'm just going to read the first page.
Sure.
Thank you. So the first section, oddly enough, is called Sheltering in Place. And obviously that has to do with staying in a marriage. Not right now, and this chapter is called The Sling. I start wearing the family dog, a mini Sheltie, a little lassie, in an unbleached cotton baby sling across the front of my body like a messenger bag, a few weeks shy of fall, until I slip the sling over my head and feel a strange surge of relief run through me, a liquid narcotic from an unknown source. There's nothing special about the day. It's no one's birthday. It's not the anniversary of someone's death or a reminder of an ancient career milestone, long gone and unsurpassed. Nothing in particular is reminding me more than usual of life's quick passage of random moments, some good, some not so good, some very, very bad, disappearing like train cars into the vanishing point of a distant horizon. It's just an opaque Thursday in late August, a month before New England is ready to give up the thick haze of summer. A day I randomly picked to try to radically declutter the basement using a book everyone is swearing by. The ruthless purging of possessions to the point of self-erasure is what I'm after. I already feel invisible. Why not go all the way? I'm 50 when I head down to the basement. My son is 13. He no longer wears matching pajamas or explains the virtues of buttermilk Eggo waffles compared to homestyle, or holds my hand when we cross the street or walk through a supermarket. He no longer begs for Legos, pulling me into the store at the mall, pointing at all the boxes, jewels on the shelves, gifts waiting to be given. It's hard for me to believe those moments ever happened, that I was ever in the middle of all that love and time and possibility, and that now I'm not. Life eventually takes away everyone and everything we love and leaves us bereft. Is that its sad lesson? That's the only explanation I have for why I now wear the dog, my version of magical thinking. Little tiny cracks are forming inside me every day, and only the dog is keeping me from coming apart completely. It gets funny. Oh, I can't hear you.
Virginia, you're muted.
It does get fun, but that's what draws you in, just the fact that, she knows he's not going to grab me into the store for the Legos, not going to wear the matching pajamas, not going to tell you why, home style waffles. I mean, it's so beautiful. Anyway, I love this book.
Thank you.
Can we show some pictures of your dog? The puppy pictures and your son?
Yes. I mean, I sent so many, and then I was having technical trouble, but oh, you got them all. Okay, yeah, that was my dog when she was a puppy. How beautiful is she?
Beautiful.
That's my son with the puppy. How beautiful are they?
Beautiful. Oh my God, that face.
Seriously. Me and the dog. My son now with the dog.
Wow.
Hmm.
Beauty. Oh, that, I love that picture.
We're in Cambridge, so there's always Marimekko in the background. And that's my son and the dog, obviously.
So how old is your son now?
He's 19.
And how old was he when you got the dog?
He was like 8.
Hmm.
And like Teddy in the book, my son is an only child. My husband has a daughter from a first marriage, but she lived far away. So anyway, by the time I had, we had Ben, and a few years went by, it was I was a little bit too old to have another. And he really, really was one of those kids who wanted a sibling. And so everybody said, get a dog. And so we got a dog, and he was like, nice dog. I want a brother, and but the dog became such a part of our family. It really is made everything so different.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's really great. Well, it's a wonderful story, and the love for this book is just overflowing here in the comments. So people have read it and loved it, and it's all over. So libraries have embraced this book. Librarians have embraced this book. Readers, patrons, so thrilled to have this book with us and to have you with us.
That means so much to hear. To have had this book published just quickly on March 3rd, which was right at the beginning, as we all know, of this incredibly strange time. I was so lucky to be able to go to a few stores and be out in the world after 14 years of not having a book out. It was such a gift to go to Harvard Bookstore and Politics and Prose and a few other places. And it was wonderful. And then it all went dark and everything stopped except these events. And so it's, I feel so removed in a way. I mean, I can't see anyone who's here, but it means so much to hear that. It's really nice to hear.
Well, it's true. I mean, and you did the Massachusetts Library Association. I mean, as you know, being a publishing insider, and we're going to bring Juliet back in to talk a little bit about that. But the fact that we get these galleys so early and seed our marketplace, and, the best we can do is tell them why we love it and hope that they do, and they do. So, and, we should just mention quickly that, we know that you're available for virtual book groups and to meet with libraries. So, librarians out there, reach out to us, to Library Love Fest, to Chris and me, and we will get that off to Laura, because this is a book that it's wonderful for book clubs, but it's wonderful in general. So Laura, thank you for
having me.
So now maybe we'll bring Juliet back, and because we have this very cool thing where both authors are publishing insiders, work in the publishing world.
Yeah.
While we're waiting, I want to say, if you don't want the dog photos to end, you should go to the Echo Instagram page, because they made this cool swag for the book with like the dog bandana and loads of dogs. It made me happy to see.
Where's our librarian?
Oh yeah, Chris, we have our, so someone was very, I guess, creative with, there's the doggy photo.
Oh.
Echo is like known for their swag. They do some great swag.
They did an amazing, I'm so glad you brought that up and that you put the pictures up. When they did that campaign, it was unbelievable. And all the pictures on social media was incredible. And given the fact that my last book before this was published in 2006, when MySpace was around and no Facebook, no Twitter, nothing, it was like, oh my God, every day I would just have all these great photos happening on my, look at me with the language, happening on my screen. But it was so great. And all these booksellers and librarians and people and readers and bookstagrammers, it was fantastic. Yeah.
And we have Jennifer Winberry's picture with our librarian pal.
We have to be creative these days. And also happy anniversary, wedding anniversary of Jennifer. Shout out. Thanks for letting us share this photo today.
Our good friend of ours, a librarian in Hunterton. So
she was like, you got to do what you got to do. And she had that and it worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
I can't find mine. but I
Oh,
would have used it. I had a few and I gave them away, and I think I gave away my last one. But
we'll have to talk to Mr. Echo.
Did your dog have one on for a while?
oh yeah, and they gave the little tin of dog biscuits. It was great, but she wore hers, and we posted, and
That's
yeah,
fun.
who knew that they were going to actually have a use beyond?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is crazy.
Okay, so where's Juliet? Chris, you're muted. Christopher.
No, she's coming on.
Okay,
Here we are.
welcome back.
Hi.
Found it to your liking.
It was beautiful.
We're joking about all the green room snacks that we've provided for both of you.
Right.
So glad you enjoyed them. So now we've heard from both of you about your books. You've read from your books. We can't speak highly enough of them. I think everybody, when we love a book, it. And these books are just page turning, compelling. They stay with you. You remember these characters, and they touch your heart. So if you haven't read these books, do it. We have the links up there where you can go ahead and get them. But the really neat thing about, in addition to both of these women writing these amazing books, is that they're both publishing insiders. So I thought it'd be kind of cool for you both to talk a little bit about what you did, what you do, and just sort of, talk about where things are, or how was it for you? How was it for you to have a book published while working in the publishing industry? And Laura, I guess that wouldn't hold true for you, but I just throw it out there to whatever you want to say.
So I'll go first because I'm older than Julia. No, I worked in publishing book publishing from 1985 to 1995, which feels like a million years ago. I was mostly at Random House, different divisions of Random House. And my last few years was spent at Knopf, which was an amazing place to work. And during that time, I was always working on a novel, though I never really talked about it. And I left after 10 years in publishing because I just really, really wanted to write the novel and get it out of my system. I never thought I'd finish it, never thought it would get published, but I felt like I had to get it out of my system. So I ended up moving to DC, which one of my authors was from DC, and she was sort of going to help me get a job and all that. And to make a long story short, I got a very boring job at the Smithsonian and was able to finish the novel down there. But while I worked in publishing, I think I read something about Juliet, doing the same thing, where I got into it assuming that it was going to be a great job to write. You're in books and you're with people in publishing and you're around everything. And so naturally, and of course, it couldn't be further from the truth. I was a publicist, so I was working all the time. I was totally stressed. I, never had any time. I wrote once a year on my vacation from Random House in the summer. And it also did this weird thing, was because my job was spending so much time with writers, calling them all the time, taking them places. I never wanted to hang around with writers. So in my private life, when I moved to Washington, I never gravitated toward writing. In fact, I avoided them because why would I want to do that and not be paid for it? And so when I moved to Cambridge a few years ago, all my friends now are writers. I'm very good friends with Alice Hoffman, Sue Miller, the HarperCollins author, who's got an amazing novel coming out soon called Monogamy, across the street. Joan Wickersham, who's an incredible writer next. So I'm all friends with all these writers, which was never going to be the plan because they, it used to be work. But anyway, it was a great business and I loved it. The job was just a little stressful. And that's also why I only read a half a page if I ever do a reading, because I used to go to all of my authors' events and they would get up there and read for sometimes 25 or 30 minutes. And I would always be like, shorter. And then I'll just close with this. What's been interesting for me is that not only did I have this background in New York publishing, and then I became a novelist, and then I became a ghostwriter. And by those three, you sort of span, because as a ghostwriter, you're working, sort of for an author, a celebrity or somebody famous. And then you also have this responsibility to the publisher, and you have to understand, what everybody needs and kind of make it work, which is very difficult sometimes. Really, it gave me a very unique perspective.
I totally relate to what you're saying about just the bandwidth issue. And so I'm still an editor. I'm the associate publisher at Soho Press, and I've been an editor for 15 years. And so I like to say it took me 15 years to write the book and also mash it into that lifestyle. But I used to take what I called vacations the month of August every year, just like you described. And my vacation was I would go to work, but I wouldn't talk to my friends. So I wouldn't do anything social ever. And then that way, at least I had time, you know, and energy. I'd get up at like 5 a.m. and try to write, but just for the month of August every year. And it became really, really just awful and hard. And I'm lucky that I found a job that I've now been at for 10 years, where my boss, the publisher, also happens to be a writer. So she gives a lot more leeway in terms of I've taken leaves of absence to try to write. And, you know, that, so luckily I have a more flexible situation there that has allowed me to be creative, but it still takes a long time. It's hard to prioritize your own creativity when you're trying to work creatively with someone else, you know?
And I also felt, when I was a publicist, I also felt like I really didn't want to talk about the fact that I was writing. I didn't feel that that was fair to them. I felt like it was their moment. And so I didn't ever, and every now and then someone would sort of find out a little like, oh, you're a writer. And I would, but I never felt like, you know, hey, let's talk about me too. So
Totally, absolutely. It's their moment. That's your job, to make it their moment. Yeah. And you don't want them to have any misgivings about you and your commitment. But the flip side of it also for me was just this like fear that, well, what if it doesn't go well? What if my book is bad and no one likes it? I don't want real writers to know that, you know. So I was so secretive about writing for so long.
right.
Oh man, in retrospect, that was kind of silly because writers are basically really nice.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I remember I took Bret Easton Ellis around. This is, I know I'm really dating myself, but I was his publicist at Knopf, and I forget which book it was. And he was afraid to fly, which I was so happy about because I hate to fly too. So we ended up taking the train like up and down the Eastern, you know, from New York to Boston to DC and back and everything. And we got to be really friendly. You know, you're sitting on a train for hours, and he was incredibly nice. Like, he actually was the kind of author that got me coffee, you know. It was really, and at the end of our train ride, we had a mutual friend, and he said, oh, I hear you're a writer too. What can I do? He said, I hear you finished a novel. I finished a first draft of Animal Husbandry. And he said, what can I do? Let me help you get an agent. So it's a long story. We ended up living a block away. He said, give me the manuscript. So I gave it to him. And I left it with his doorman, and 2 days later, it was back with my doorman. I opened it up, and it was like, had writing all over it. It was a big black Sharpie, and most of it said, boring, this is terrible, I'm bored, nothing's happening. And then every now and then I'm getting to the good part. And then every now and then it would say brilliant, you know, but mostly boring, things crossed out. And it was very, I will not lie, it was very traumatizing. I put it away for a while. I couldn't even believe how full of shame. I was so disgusted with my, you know. And about 6 or 7 months later, I took it out. And I have to say, he was right. You know, he was right. And I ended up taking about 150 pages out. And started again, and that became the book that I sold a few months later as Animal Husbandry. But it was funny because it was like, I thought, oh, this is so great, like the proximity to this famous dude, and now he's going to help me, and it's like did not go as planned, but it was incredibly helpful in the end.
I will say, so that's an inspiring story, because I think 6 or 7 months is how long it takes to absorb a critique like that. I relate to that a lot, but per your point about he was the kind of author who got his publicist coffee, I just want to say every author should be the author that gets their publicist coffee. And I'm not saying this just because I know our mutual publicist is watching us right now. I would totally buy you a coffee, Sonia, if I could, but also because I'm married to a publicist. And Laura, you know, tell me that this isn't true, but I think publicists are the most frequently abused person in the publishing chain of command, because it's kind of like if anything doesn't go the way the author expects it to, they just blame the publicist, and it's just really, really hard. So you have such a hard job. I'm amazed you managed to do it for 10 years. And I think, you know, utmost respect to you there, and that you found the time and the space to write, and may all authors buy their publicist coffee all the time.
Well, that's so funny because I used to waitress. I started, in high school waitressing at IHOP, graveyard shift. So I always felt like the waitress in publishing, because if something went well, it was the editor. The editor got the kudos. If the book hit the list, it was the editor. We only got blamed for the bad stuff.
Right.
But and I will not go into the long story, but what caused me to finally leave New York was I had been the publicist for Lauren Bacall. I don't know if you remember who she was, but
You can't just drop that at the end.
Really,
it was so incredible. It was such an abusive, crazy thing. And my boss, Paul Bogarts, at the time was like, hey, we'll split it. You go half and I'll go half. And he ended up, after 2 cities, he was like, I can't. And I took over, and I was supposed to go for 4 full weeks, and I lasted 3 weeks and 4 days, and someone had to take over. It crushed me. And then a few months later, I've never been thinner in my whole life. I was so thin, but it was about 3 months or 4 months after that, I left publishing. I left New York. I was like, I'm done. It was completely, it can be really bad when it's.
I'm going to take you out for a virtual martini one of these days, and I want the whole story, not safe for work story.
Can I come?
You can come, Virginia.
I totally want to hear that. Wow. That's some good juice.
Yeah, there was a lot of good juice back then, but
Yeah.
most of there were so many great people to work with. It really was the exception to have somebody that almost comically bad. It wasn't funny at the time.
Is it funny now?
It's sort of funny. It was like, it was really funny because I left New York, I moved to DC, and I remember I had told all these different people, and she was still alive. She's not alive anymore. And she was terrified. It was terrifying. Like, I joke about it now, but it was the reason I got so thin is I could not digest my food when I was with her. It was terrifying. She was abusive. And I had told somebody at some paper, I can't remember. And I remember being in my new apartment in Washington, and the phone rang. It was a landline, and it had a weird number, and I picked up, and it was somebody pretending to be her assistant. And I remember just getting a complete, traumatic rush of adrenaline, and it turned out it was a joke, but it was just, it was terrifying.
Well, I have to say, I think, but you're both right that for the most part, writers are really such very nice people. I mean, you two are very nice. And we've worked with, Chris and Lainey and I have worked with a lot of writers, and obviously we have all been there and have all worked ushering through whether it's a debut, a mid-list, or somebody who's just got a massive backlist and here's their next one. It's kind of an honor and a cool thing to be able to connect a reader, a librarian who's going to turn around and connect their patrons to a book. That connection is the coolest thing, I have to say.
Yeah.
For us, I know Lainey and Chris and I talk about it all the time. Well, not all the time, but one of the things I think that we all love is when you can get somebody. How jazzy is that? When you love something and you give it to somebody else, it's so disappointing when they're like, shmeh, and when they love it, it's the best. And handing it to a librarian that's a ripple effect. That's a rock in a lake. And that goes on and on, which is really wonderful. So, well, I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Laura?
No, I mean, that was the joy of being a publicist, is having, reading something so amazing and having the opportunity to spread the word. And I think as authors like Juliet and I are now, who are being published, having had careers, or she still has a career in publishing, we understand so much what our publishers do for us and what our publicists do and what our editors do. So we know how the sausage is made. And we also know, I remember, one of the incredibly touching things about my experience this time around with Echo is I had been out of the game for 14 years, a really long time, and they were all so kind and generous and so sensitive to everything. And they would say like, we're trying for this, but if it doesn't work out, and of course, a lot of things worked out and some didn't. And I was so like, I so understood, the sense, I was so grateful for the sensitivity, but I know so much about how hard it is. You're pitching and you're waiting for things to come through, and sometimes they don't. And they wanted so much for this to work for me and to be a great experience. And it was such a gift. It was such a gift that they did such a great job. But I think Juliet, and I know from a really inside position of how hard they work.
No, it's true. I think Echo's a really special place because they are, as you describe, there's so much transparency and direct connection with the author. And maybe it is because you and I both know the jargon. I don't know, but it's just been a dream experience with them. And I'm not surprised that the list is just so beautiful and that it's so, it's just such an amazing company to be in, all of these other authors, because they've been taken care of the same way. They've been gotten into the right hands. And yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. It's Daniel Halpern at the helm, and Miriam and Sonia, Megan Deans. They're all so wonderful. They're just wonderful, and they are transparent. I feel that way myself with them. It's they're just, and they're very obviously, it does feel like a very tailored list and very selective and different and interesting, like your two books, which aren't alike but are equally wonderful and unforgettable. Frankly, they just are. They are unforgettable. I think, well, we're at 3:08, so I think we're going to have to wrap it up. But before we do, is there anything else that either of you would like to say, or Chris or Lainey, before we say goodbye? Anything?
Nothing from me, just thank you. It is pretty incredible to have two authors at the team. Again, we all read so differently between Virginia and I and Lainey, and to have not one but two books that we all three loved is pretty special. To be able to sit down with both of you at the same time is really great. So we do appreciate it very much.
I feel very full after this conversation, like very content.
Oh, there we go. So
Thank you so much for your support all these months. It was really nice to always see the tweets and the things online. You guys are really so active and so supportive. Meant a lot.
It's true. You're the best. Thank you so much.
well, it's easy when the books are as great as yours are. So with that, I think we will say goodbye. Again, Juliet Graham, 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna and Laura Zigman, Separation Anxiety. The links are there. If you want to get in touch with either of the authors to have them virtually visit your library, send an email to me, to Chris, to Lainey, and we will put you in touch with them. And don't forget about the book club brochure on the link that we put up there. And go to our book club catalog, book club, Chris, what is it? Bookclub.com.
I wish we had bookclub.com. That'd be amazing. HarperLibraryBookClub.com. And we'll put a link in the comments as well.
Yeah.
So
it's
yes.
great, all refreshed and new, and there Laura's book and Juliet's book is there, and it's lots to pick from. So anyway, thank you both so much for coming on, for talking to us, for reading to us, and for sharing your insights as publishers / authors. This has been really, really wonderful. As Lainey says, it's we feel full, our hearts are full.
Thank you. Mine too. Thank you.
Okay. We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone. Be safe, and thank you for joining.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.